Can't get that print off the bed? Stay tuned, because on the first layer today, we're going to show you how to solve that issue. Hey, welcome to the show. My name's Richard Cleveland. I'm your host here on the First Layer 3 times a week. This is a show that explores the world of 3D printing. And today is no different. We are diving back into our troubleshooting guide to talk about getting that print unstuck from the bed, because you may have a little bit too much adhesion. So listen, if this is your first time here, by all means, welcome, and go down and hit that little button that looks like this down at the bottom of the screen, and subscribe to the show and get notified every time that we put up a brand new episode about 3D printing. So let's dive into it, because we got a lot to cover, and we got a little bit of a bonus at the end today. So we're talking about prints that are sticking too much to the bed and why that might happen. I want to give you an illustration here. This is a pretty extreme version, but this particular benchy, of course, was too close to the bed. There's too much squish and too much adhesion. So as you can see, what happened when they took it off the bed, it took a bit of the mat with it. Now, there's a couple of reasons why this happens. And first and foremost, it has to do with nozzle being too close to the bed. And we talked about that in the last episode, so I'm not going to rehash it. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes in the series, we're going to put some links down below for you to go out and check those out. And we'll also put one up in the card over here so that you can go and check that out as well. Now, bed temperature. This is another issue that a lot of people have. Now, some people will say, I don't put any temperature on my PLA. Every material is different. Now, you're printing at a higher bed temperature range and experiencing your print sticking to too much. That is a possibility. When it comes to things like PLA, I don't normally print over 60 degrees. A hotter bed temperature means increased adhesion, no matter what plastic you're using. What you want to do is you want to check you're not printing too close to the glass or whatever substrate that you're printing on, whether it be aluminum bed, build tack, or anything like that. You want to check that you're not too close. Again, that comes into play when we talked about bed leveling in the first episode, and that you're not too close to the glass transition temperature of the actual material. Every material has a glass transition temperature, and what that means is that that's where it starts to soften. So in the case of PLA, it's very low. So I'm going to put a link down in the description below where you can go and find the glass transition temperature of most materials. So if your print is sticking too much, reduce the heat on the bed by about 5 degrees. If it's still sticking too much, you may have an issue where your nozzle is too close to the bed, and it's causing the material to embed itself into the substrate that you're using. And it usually happens when you're using something like build tack or any of the textured surfaces that you can get. Signs that your bed adhesion is too much is when printing a sticky filament such as flexible material or PETG. Some materials are known to adhere extremely well, and PETG is one of those materials that sticks really, really well because it has a different makeup in the particular plastic, so it causes it to stick down more. Now, if you are using glass, what I recommend that you do when it comes to PETG is have some barrier between the glass and the PETG, because what will happen is PETG sticks so well that it will lift pieces of the glass with it when it comes off. I've had this experience happen to me. Everybody said to me, yeah, you're printing with PETG, you better watch your glass. And I was the big skeptic, as a lot of people are. I said, nah, I've been printing with it now for 2 weeks. Nothing's ever happened. And wouldn't you know it, within a couple of days, I pulled off a big chunk of glass out of borosilicate glass, which is a temperature style glass, and it's the glass that most printers use as a substrate. So what you want to do there is you want to put a very light layer of something like glue stick, or, God I say it, hairspray. I don't know where my glue stick went, but it's here somewhere. You know, if you're using glass, you want to make sure that you have that available to you. So glue stick works really well as a median, as a release layer. Now, one of the other things that you can do is add a very thin layer of talcum or baby powder. And what this will do is it will allow the print to have something between it and the base below. So you don't want to put too much on very, very lightly, and then you're going to be able to get your PETG off the bed, okay? Release agents. Signs that you might need a release agent. Well, you're not using anything on your bed, and your prints are extremely difficult to remove. And we talked a little bit about that. On occasion, it may cause damage to your bed. And we talked about that when it comes to PETG. Always having a barrier. Adding an additional film to the bed is probably the best way to go. You want to use a thin layer of PVA glue. What I find works the best is heating up the bed and then taking your glue and just doing a very light smear across the glass. And then while it's still warm, what's happening is the glue will melt some and it will almost self-level. So you won't get aberrations in your print from ripples in the glue. Your extrusion multiplier might be a cause of you having too much stick to your bed. Your prints are sticking too much and are too hard to remove. You're already tried moving the nozzle and things like that. So the extrusion multiplier will affect the pressure on the material flow onto the bed. Okay, so check your extrusion multiplier. You can find that both in Cura very easily and in Simplify 3D. Now you want to slightly decrease that extrusion multiplier. If you're using Simplify 3D, I know that most of the profiles come with a 0.90 millimeter extrusion multiplier. So it's not doing 100%. Some prints I do at 100% extrusion multiplier, but again, it has to do with that being too close or too far from the bed. Now, one of the things that you can do to get your print off the bed is using a can of spray like this. Dust off. What you do, invert the can and make sure that you have the hose on, because it works best this way because you don't want to freeze your fingers. And then blow this around the bottom of the print and onto the print bed. It won't affect your glass. It won't affect your print bed in any way, but it will help you to cool down that layer between the print bed and the first layer so that you'll be able to pop off the print much easier. So that's a good way to do it. Now, some filament specific tips. PETG is known to be strong enough to rip chunks out of your glass, as I said before, when cooling down after a print or bonded permanently to a PEI bed. So again, you want to make sure that you check that. Flexible filaments have a habit of sticking way too well to certain bed surfaces. Add Kapton tape, or for flexible filaments, peel the Kapton tape from the bed, then the tape from the bottom of the print to minimize the risk of damaging. If you don't know what Kapton tape is, I believe there's some on my shelf over here. I'm just going to grab a roll. Yeah, you might have to move some stuff out of the way. There we go. So this is Kapton tape. Let me go to the upper camera here. So this is Kapton tape, and Kapton tape is something we put around our hot ends sometimes. In the early days, we used this as an insulator a lot of times. But you can put down the wider strips of the 50 millimeter or 100 millimeter strips of Kapton tape, and just put that down over the bed and then lift that tape up. Now this is fairly expensive. It's used in electronics quite a bit. So be sure to use it sparingly. So that will minimize any of the risks. Now, when I talk about putting a barrier between your prints, let's look at our little whiteboard here again. We'll go over there because you guys love the whiteboard. So when your print makes a little divot in your substrate, whether you're using, build tack, and I use build tack because that's what comes on most printers today is a build tack. What's happening is that is literally melting into that plastic substrate. So it makes it very difficult for you to get the print off, okay? So it's piling up the material on either side, and then you'll end up with something like sticking. So it can, let's say these are your lines of your print. Now what can happen is you can get one that curls because it's going back, because it's too close. The nozzle is catching the end of that and pulling it away. So again, that goes back to what we've talked about in previous episodes. Again, go back and check those out, but you want to make sure that you've got that proper thickness between the two parts of your print. Now, how you go about doing that, and I've talked about this many, many times, my favorite thing is this guy right here, a little Post-it note. The Post-it notes work great. Level your bed corner to corner, okay? I laid that out, and a couple of people have been on the Facebook page asking a little bit about that, and I have not written a G code to do that. I would rather you learn to level the bed manually instead of adding G code to it, okay? We will at some point write a little G code so that you can include it into your slicers, but you don't have to level the bed every time. If you do it right the first time, your bed will last roughly about half a dozen prints or so. Or a month or two, it doesn't matter. I know some guys who haven't leveled their bed in 6 or 7 months. I found with the Ender 3 that now that I can pull the plate off, it doesn't really affect the level of the bed because I just unclip the plate, pull it off, pop my prints, and Bob's your uncle, or Fred's your uncle, or somebody's your uncle. So that pretty much takes care of being too close. Now we've covered bed leveling, we've covered prints not sticking to the bed, and we've covered prints sticking too well to the bed. Here's your bonus tip for today. We're going to talk a little bit about warping. What is warping? How does it happen? Why does it happen? Now, warping can be caused by a few different variables, but it's fairly easy to recognize and resolve. Now we're going to go through how to fix it. I got my notes in front of me, so that's why I keep looking down. You guys bear with me. What are the signs of warping? Usually it starts in the corners and can progress around the print. If the print isn't stopped, the print will start to lift and appear to peel away from the bed. And we've all seen that. Warping occurs when the physical forces that come into play as a material is cooling down. And I talk about this many times with customers that come into Spool 3D as well. What's happening is it's cooling down too fast. So warping is increased, and the higher temperature difference is within the printed object, and or the higher the difference is between the printed temperature and the room temperature. So your printing temperature is going to be right around 200 for PLA. I keep my bed on all my printers at about 60 degrees when I'm printing with PLA. That seems to give me the best adhesion. I get no warping. If I do get warping, what I tend to do is I will knock that up by about 5 degrees just to keep that warmth around that first layer, because what's happening is when the first layer goes down, we'll go back to the whiteboard here, when that first layer goes down, it has to be warm enough to get the second layer to stick to it. Because remember, we have a fan. That's my idea of a fan. Looks like a daisy, but it's blowing air onto that layer as it is coming out the nozzle. So what can happen is if that fan is started too early, it can cause the first layer to cool too quickly. Then if that first layer cools too quickly, every layer above that is going to do the same thing till it gets to a point where it stops. And you'll notice curling when that happens. So how do you get rid of it? Well, what you want to do is you want to go back to looking at what we talked about with prints sticking to the bed. Again, it boils down to temperature. You got to have that nice bed and printing temperature in the room as well. Your room temperature is going to play a big part in this. Print with a little cooler depending on the initial printing temperature. You might want to print a little hotter in some cases. You want to either up or down your print temperature. And also infill is going to affect warping as well. If you've got too much infill, what can happen is all of that infill can shrink, and it's going to shrink. Plastics by nature shrink. So if it is shrinking too much on an, like let's say a corner that has very tight radiuses and you're using, let's say, God forbid, you're using 35 or 40% infill on PLA. If you're doing that, you're wasting plastic. And we've talked about wasting plastic before, but if you are getting that problem, check your infill as well. Reduce the amount of infill you have. Reduce the thickness of the layer of walls. I've heard of people going up to 2 millimeters in thickness with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, and that's way too thick for your walls. Your walls shouldn't be any more maximum of 1.6 millimeters. And that is equivalent to 4 perimeters or 4 walls. Any more than 4 walls, A, is a waste of plastic, and B, isn't going to give you any more strength in your part. Okay? Printer specific tips. The CR10S suffers quite badly from bowling. This is where the center of the glass plate is unsupported to either the metal backplate or is bowed downwards, or the glass itself is not completely flat. And that seems to be a big problem with Creality's glass. Now, how you get around that, of course, is by getting something that's truly flat. And the best way to do that is to, get this, buy a mirror. Put a mirror on your bed. You can buy them from Lowe's, Home Depot. Usually any good hardware store will have a pack of tiles. You want to get the 12-inch tiles for Creality. And you can take these mirror tiles to a local glass cutter and get them cut down to a different size for you. For 16 bucks, you're getting 6 mirrors. So you've got a lot of mirrors to play with. So the Creality is really bad for that. Other things that can happen, and we talked about this on the last episode as well, where the bed itself isn't completely flat. And that happens with aluminum beds. It's very, very common, especially with Chinese 3D printer manufacturers. The bed, for whatever reason, is not completely flat. So how you can fix that is by using a little Kapton tape in the middle, using a little masking tape in the middle or around the outside, depending if you have a bow or a dip, okay? So that pretty much covers everything that we wanted to cover today regarding sticking and warping. We're going to come back in 2 episodes. We are going to be talking more about troubleshooting just for you guys. We're going to deal a little bit more with the nozzle and how you can unclog the nozzle in a very easy and efficient way. So now we've got a few people to thank. First and foremost, I want to thank my Patreons for all that they do. Patreons, thank you for keeping the show afloat. We are over 2,000 subscribers now. We're on our way to 5,000 when we're going to do a contest coming up on the 4th of October, where we are going to give away 4 TL smoothers for your printer. So somebody's going to win those on our anniversary. And we're 1 year old on October 4th. Wow, that's really crazy. I thank each and every one of you guys for watching. Again, if you are new to the show, I want to welcome you, and I hope you got something out of today's episode. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button so you get notified, like, share, and all that other great stuff with your friends. And we'll build this community even bigger. We've got a community over on Facebook. Go check that out as well. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and a whole bunch of other places on the interwebs. So if you are interested in becoming a Patreon and helping us to support the show, you can certainly go to patreon.com/thefirstlayer, pick one of the categories there, and each and every month we will thank you very much for your patronage. And if you are not interested in having a monthly commitment, and I know times are tough and we're not asking you to go ahead and do that, but you know, I love coffee. So you can always go to buy me a coffee, and I'm going to take a sip now. Buymeacoffee.com/thefirstlayer, and you can buy the whole crew coffee. Jess, there she is. And Frank and Brian, all of us love coffee, and even Derek, the owner of Spool 3D, loves coffee. Speaking of Spool 3D, we want to thank them for everything that they do. They provide us with the space to bring you these shows each and every week. And Spool 3D has everything that you need, from printers, filaments, and all the parts and accessories for your next upgrade or custom build. So check them out today at spool3d.ca. Print it right, print it with Spool 3D. Now, I want to thank my wonderful staff who come in and volunteer their time to help the show get finished and get done. And that includes the lovely Jess Cornett-Ching. There she is. Frank Awesome and Brian Baker, who just volunteer their time to help us get the show done. Oh, and we have to mention, you know, the lady behind the scenes that makes cake for us once in a while. And that is my lovely wife, Geraldine. So we have a great crew. We've got a great bunch of people like you. Listen, if you want to send something into the show, you can certainly do that by sending it to our address, which is located down in the description below. If you are interested in sending me private messages, you can do so either on Facebook or send them to richard@thefirstlayer.com. And we will certainly, we'll put that in here down in the lower third. We'll do that in post. Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll put it in post. So you can send it over to richard@thefirstlayer.com. And if you want to send something in to have it viewed on the show, well, the address, as I said, is down below. If you're a company looking to have your products reviewed by The First Layer, you can always get in contact with me again through richard@thefirstlayer.com. And we really appreciate everybody that comes and sends us messages. And I've got some questions to answer on YouTube. Notably, I have been a little bit absent from YouTube, so I have to get back and start answering some questions. So we are going to answer those questions. We may actually answer some of those right here on the show in upcoming episodes as well. So for now, my friends, I will see you on Monday when we talk a little bit about the GPL once again. So until then, remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print. Until next time.